So we're going from 2, 7, 2, 7. Hi everyone! Today I am continuing my journey in rock music, again looking at a little bit more modern band, and that is Smashing Pumpkins and I remember that they formed in the late 80s, if I remember correctly. Was it in Chicago? Anyway, the first song that I listened to by them was a couple months ago or so, and that was Porcelina of the Vast Oceans. Now today, I'm returning to this band, and I'm going to be listening to Galapagos. And I had to look here to see what it was, because it was just placed in front of me. As usual, I have these notes, and Vlad has given me a few paragraphs to read about the song. Since I already listened to the band once, there isn't so much band-specific info. So, Galapagos is a song from the Smashing Pumpkins' third studio album, Melancholy and the Infinite Sadness. And melancholy is spelled rather uniquely here. M-E-L-L-O-N for melon, and collie, C-O-L-L-I-E. Melancholy and the Infinite Sadness. Released in 1995. The title is a reference to the Galapagos Islands, intentionally misspelled. I see the song is spelled G-A-L-A-P-O-G-O-S. Galapagos. Interesting. Made famous by Charles Darwin. Lyrically, the song compares the isolation that Billy Corgan felt with his marriage to that of the islands, which inspired the theory of evolution. What a unique link. Oh, and here's a quote by Billy Corgan, saying, "I cannot recall what it was about Darwin's fabled set of islands that led me to associate my crumbling marriage to them." Well, I was hoping that he would enlighten me. "Perhaps I was wondering if in the lure of a total and disconnected isolation we might better survive the onslaught of life's ceaseless progress. Idealizing a failed romance can only get you so far, and once engaged, I found that somewhere between my idealism and natural compassion for an identified other, there lived a truth I was not yet willing to swallow about myself." Cue up my admitting here that one of us was about to be abandoned, never realizing that the desertion would flow both ways. Galapagos stands up over time as a remnant of grace that I lost as I wrote it. Interesting. I guess I like what he said because it feels like I get the sense that he went through a process in which he faced himself honestly along the way, and maybe what he came up with in this song isn't what he ended up with feeling as a person, believing as a person, seeing as a person about himself. But that's an interesting thing to have this little moment from his personal journey. Well, I remember with Porcelina of the Vast Oceans, it was a very textural, atmospheric journey. And I remember that I played the harp along with it for fun in a couple spots. Did I play the harp, or did I just talk about playing the harp? Anyway, I'm curious to compare this song with that one and notice and see if it's a similar style. Is this a Smashing Pumpkins style that is signature to them? Or was that a one-off and this is a completely different style? We'll find out right away. Now, I want to make it clear as I start this, because I want to comment a comparison, and I said I was going to be comparing, but I also want to make it clear that I am also taking this song on its own merits and not merely looking to connect it to Porcelina of the Vast Oceans. But I noticed that just like in Porcelina of the Vast Oceans, we had this very atmospheric, soft entrance. Some cymbals rubbing together, some plucked strings, and basically broken chords, arpeggios, patterned in different configurations, but a nice, easygoing entrance to the song. And then the soft voice, which I also remember. It's a very gentle, reflective kind of sound. Even the voice is very introspective. And it suits the lyrics. Ain't it funny how we pretend we're still a child? And then he goes on in this introspective way, softly stolen under blanket skies and rescue me from me. So it is very much a self-examination moment. All that I believe, I won't deny the pain, I won't deny the change. And should I fall from grace, here with you, will you leave me too? Now, it's interesting to me that primarily what's happening instrumentally is creating a textural backdrop for these lyrics. And yet the voice and these lyrics are very much layered within the instrumental mix, not really standing out from it. It's very different from, say, Pink Floyd, The Wall, or of course, the Beatles were much earlier. This is now in the late 80s. But this mixing of the voice within the instrumentation, what do I mean by that? Well, as I'm listening to it, I'm hearing a lot of acoustic reverb and resonance from the instruments. Very present. Even though they are not doing anything particularly outstanding. They're simply making little ripples, chords, shifting harmonies. And then the voice, which has the melody, the part that we would sing, feels like it's maybe at least on the same level, if not even set underneath that layer of sound that we hear. It's partly his tone, his vocal timbre, quality, because it's very soft. And this entire song, at least up until this point, is very soft, almost hazy, fuzzy. There's not a real point to the sound. Well, the last song I did here recently that seems to be a significant contrast is Pink Floyd's The Wall. I listened and did the in-depth to Nobody Home. And so it's very fresh in my mind, the pungency and the pointedness of that voice and the way it stands out from the instruments and is separate from the instruments. And here, it's a very, very different setup. And as I'm sitting here thinking about this textural balance, I'm also going through in my mind some of the other pieces of music I've listened to a bit closer to 95, a little bit more on an equal footing, time-wise, with this song. Something like Nirvana and Bon Jovi. Remember, I listened to Bon Jovi and I loved the voice. And then, of course, Nirvana was Smells Like Teen Spirit, I think. Is that right?
Yes.
I hope I'm not mixing up the bands and the songs. Sometimes that happens because I'm going through so much music that is so new. And it's not just the music that's new, it's the names and the bands and all of this. So I have to keep it all organized in my mind. And sometimes I might mix it up. Forgive me if I do. Bon Jovi was It's My Life. Again, very powerful, pointed voice. Very strong instrumentation. But the voice stood out. Smells Like Teen Spirit from Nirvana. Again, it's not like this Smashing Pumpkins sound. And then, of course, Scorpions' Still Loving You, which I really enjoyed the voice and that whole piece of music. I guess those are the ones I can recall right now in this moment. And comparing them to Smashing Pumpkins, this is very different. This is much softer. This is much more... In some ways, it's simpler. Intentionally so, it seems, because it seems like they want to create a very easy listening quality about the music. Something that you could just play that is rather soothing, calming, gentle, doesn't really demand attention. That's how it strikes me, at least so far. Now, what happens next? I don't know. I remember with the first song I listened to, Porcelina of the Vast Oceans, it started out easily, and then it felt like we went on quite a journey out to somewhere fantastic. So, who knows if this will do the same. But those are the things that are running around in my mind as I'm listening to this and getting into this song for the first time. I kind of like this part. Bum, 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 bum. There's a little bit of building urgency there. A little bit of a stronger feel than just the bum 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 bum, which is very nice. But if it didn't have this bum 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 part, I guess it would feel a bit weak by the end of the song. say that I liked the voice there.
You tell me I am still the man I'm supposed to be. I won't deny the pain. I won't deny the change. And should I fall from grace, here with you, will you leave me true? Will you leave me too? Too late to turn back now.
Now we got something a little bit more solid in there. It took us a while to get to it. So soft and fuzzy isn't the word. Neither is hazy. A bit thin. A bit papery, maybe, I would say. And I think most of it has to do with the voice. I'm not in love with this voice. At least not yet. It doesn't strike me as a voice that is either tonally really interesting to my ears, nor particularly expressive. And when I listen to a voice, I guess I want to hear at least one of those. Either something really expressive, it doesn't have to be a sound that I love, or something that is a sound that I love, even if it just to enjoy the voice as an instrumental contribution. I don't yet find that in this voice. Maybe that's why I'm struggling with this balance between the instruments and the voice. Maybe that's why there is that placement of the voice. Perhaps he's just not a really strong singer. Perhaps he's singing there and they're using the instruments to help fill it out. That would make sense. And I could relate to that. I could understand that. So I'm going to go on. Actually, I'm going to back up a little bit. No, I'm going to go on and then I'll back up once I get to the end. But let's get through to the end of this because it's always possible my mind might change along the way.
Too late to turn back now. I'm running out of sound, and I am changing. And if we died right now, this fool you love somehow is here with you. I won't deny the pain. I won't deny the change. And should I fall from grace, here with you, would you leave me too? Would you leave me too?
I guess it's nice. I can't say I'm in love with it, but it's nice. And if if it's a sound that you like and you relate to, then it would be an absolutely lovely piece of music to listen to. It's okay for me, but not something that I'm jumping up and down saying, I'm desperate to hear this again. Let's go back though, because I want to talk a bit about, I don't want to sound like I'm just being all negative about it. I am being very honest about my first impressions and open about how it strikes me. But also, I want to go back and kind of evaluate it from a musical perspective and see if we can understand a bit of why it sounds the way it does. Especially if you enjoy this kind of music, then it's very nice to know why and how. And if you like to be creative with your own music and you enjoy this and you want to kind of build something inspired by it, how might you do that? So let's go back through and listen to parts of it again. This is actually a very nice introduction, and it's very simple and easy to create as well. Essentially, we have a single chord, and that's the D. And pretty much everything is a D all throughout, except for a little interruption right here, still with D kind of mixed in there somehow. And if we explore this on the instrument a bit, we have the D in our bass. That is kind of the stabilizing force, the anchor pin for the entire introduction. And off of that, we're building out of that chord. We have an F sharp and an A within the chord. And the first bit we have a D, A, F sharp. We've mixed in an E here. This is a pretty common thing to do, is if we have a triad, which is a 3-note chord, we might fill in one of the notes to give a little more color, texture. I could play it just like that. Sounds pretty good. You could play it in pretty much any configuration, any order, those notes, and it would sound pretty good. So what they've done is they've put the D here, they've thrown the E here just for a bit of extra color. This is the first thing we hear, and we hear it quite often throughout the intro, and when the voice enters, we still hear it behind. That's a nice accompaniment pattern. And then, of course, it gets a bit dull if we sit there. And so then we will shift a bit and add a 7th. Well, this gets a bit interesting. We were doing adding a 2 to the chord. D, E. This is the 2. F sharp, A. Now we're going to get rid of the 2. We're going to add a 7th. So we're going from 2, 7, 2, 7. And the chord is not changing fundamentally. It's simply changing the additions, the colorative notes that we add to it. We could even try something different. This is not in the song, I want to make that clear, but taking this idea of adding a coloring note to your basic triad, you could, instead of a 2, you could add a 4. And instead of adding a 7, you could add a 6. choose which coloring notes you would like to have in your mix. And that is what a good portion of this song is built off of. And we're going to progress through this score here a bit. I'm going to scroll. It's a funny score, so we're going horizontally. But let's go ahead and look and see how much of this figuration we have, this pattern that we find here. How long does it go on? It goes on here. It keeps on going. It keeps on going. Only here does it change. Now we have something a bit different. And that a bit different section also continues for quite some time. So let's look at that a bit as well. What is happening? And remember, I commented that I liked that spot. I liked the way it changed the feel of the piece and gave it a little bit more energy, urgency. So let's just listen forwards until we get to that. There's a very warm, fat sounding bass there. And I like that bass because it fills out the bottom end of this music. I'm focusing a lot on the string accompaniment, well, I don't mean bowed strings, I mean plucked strings, guitar or harp or something like that. I'm focusing on that part of it, but there's more to the music than just that. There's this bass down underneath, which is actually quite nice. And I want to back up just a little bit because I enjoy the way it's moving, walking around as well. It gives a shape to the lower side of the music as well. I like the way it moves with the voice there. Bum, 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 bum. As he's singing, pretend we're still a child. Works very well, actually. Especially because, okay, I was kind of picking on his voice a while ago. But now as I'm going through the second listen, I told you, my mind might change in the middle of things. As I'm going through the second listen, I'm noticing how the music maybe compensates isn't the right word. Balances the thinness of his voice. And this is one of the ways. Since he has a very small, thin-sounding voice with not a lot of point to it, the bass underneath, this fat bass, round sound, which is also very mellow and subdued, is the perfect pairing for the voice on top. Because it doesn't overwhelm the voice, it doesn't overpower it, but it gives the impression of a bit more resonance, and it works to fill out what we might, if we want to be critical, we could say the voice is lacking, but actually the voice is functioning very well as a pairing with the bass. Notice that here as we listen to Pretend We're Still a Child.
Pretend we're still a child.
Isn't that nice? And then
Stolen under a blanket sky.
here it is again. And out of that, that's a really nice transition. I didn't mention it the first time around, but I noticed it even the first time around. Stolen under blanket skies, and the bass goes bum 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 bum, just as it did Pretend We're Still a Child. Right there. But then the second time, softly stolen under blanket skies. And the pulsing comes out of that line. It's a very natural and easy transition to make, which flows so nicely because we heard the line before, dum bum 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 bum, and it was a resting place. Now, dum bum bum bum, it's a resting place but also a launching place. Bum 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 bum. Very nice.
Under blanket skies.
And out of there, we get this more
And rescue me from me.
dynamic,
And all
little more
that
motion
I
here.
believe. I won't deny the pain. I won't deny the change.
And at this point, the guitar has just gone to strumming very lightly. Strum, 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 which the harp doesn't do so well. So I won't try to demonstrate, but you can use your ears and notice it yourself in the recording. It's really nice, actually. The second time around, as I'm going through it, I'm less focused on the voice. I'm more focused on the instruments. And as I focus more on the instruments, it becomes more satisfying to listen to. That kind of reinforces my thought that the voice is placed behind. The instruments are given more prominence in their balance of the recording. But it was actually a very good musical design decision because the voice works much better as this background. And I'm thinking about the lyrics too, and how maybe it could all fit together and work as a whole, as an artistic expression. This idea of the introspective, reflective thought that is we find in the lyrics, as well as the idea that this is somehow inspired by the isolation of the Galapagos Islands. You know, it's so interesting that both of the Smashing Pumpkins songs that I've heard so far are somehow linked to the ocean in some way or other. The Galapagos Islands are isolated by the water around them. And there is a sort of watery aspect to this as well. And it's almost as if this voice is the picture of one's isolation and separation. It sounds very small compared to the sea around it. It sounds as if we're just one small individual standing on the islands there, contemplating, how did we get in this predicament? And how do we... Of course, this is about a relationship too. How have I hurt the relationship? How have I contributed to this failure? And the honesty in it as well. I won't deny the pain. I won't deny the change. All of that is actually very well represented by this song. As I'm listening the second time through, it makes a whole lot more sense. Sometimes it takes a second listen for me. And yes, it is a very simple kind of music. There is nothing dramatic happening. There are no grand transitions or statements, but it's not meant to be that way. It is a very much self-reflective piece of music, which is also a representation of an experience. and I think it does represent the experience very well. Now I want to go to where I noticed that it got a lot more dynamic a bit later in the song. So let's see if I can find this here. It's as if that last part is kind of looking a bit further out, beyond the island on which we are stranded, further out into the sea that surrounds us, and finding some reason to hope, as well as feeling incredibly dwarfed and perhaps a little bit self-doubtful about whether or not I'm going to survive this. I think it's a nice way of stating some of the things that a person has to go through in a situation like that. And at the same time, it's very approachable. It's very relatable musically, because it's not an incredibly complex, heart-wrenching, traumatic experience. And so whether it's simply something that feels good to listen to, or whether it's a song that speaks to you on a more personal level with your own experience, it is actually fairly well put together. I should say more than that. Not fairly well put together. It is very well put together. The structure is good. The design is good. The balance is appropriate for what is being expressed here. And so, well, there's my second Smashing Pumpkins song, both of which were somehow connected to the sea. That has me curious. How much of their work is connected to the sea? And I might return sometime and try another one to see where it comes from and where it takes us. I'll see you next time.